Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 20th episode of Learning Kitchen Live. My name is Beth, and I'm one of the dietitians here at Community Servings, and welcome to our last class before we take a tiny break for the Thanksgiving holiday. So we'll have our class today, and then we're going to resume after Thanksgiving. So today I'm going to be talking about cooking with pantry staples, and in particular cooking with canned items. And the reason I picked that topic is that the COVID crisis is still happening, and people are talking about what's going to happen if we have to kind of go back into our homes, that if restaurants have to shut down again. So I wanted to talk about how to stock your pantry really well, so that if you need to go a week or two without grocery shopping, you can still eat some really healthy meals, and in particular using some canned items. So I'm going to make a soup, and soups are a really great way to use canned items because things get cooked down, and you can really do a lot of work with flavoring and different broths, and if you have a couple of just staple vegetables, you can really do a lot. And then I'm also going to be making like a sweet and savory salsa that would be a great topping for either chicken or fish, or as a quick dip or an appetizer. But what I like about it is it uses mostly either pantry staples or things that last in your refrigerator for a really long time, and then some canned fruit. So, we can go a little out of season, we can have things that we store for a long time and still get something really fresh and bright and nutritious, and we can use it in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to start with the soup, and basically all it's going to be is some canned peas and some frozen spinach. And I think frozen spinach is probably the number one pantry staple that I always have on hand. It is the most versatile and of course healthy thing, and frozen spinach is just as healthy as fresh spinach, and the work is already done for you. So it can't go bad, you don't have to chop it, you don't have to clean it. And anyone who's ever cooked with a big huge bag of spinach knows that when it cooks down it looks like this, and you sort of think to yourself, well, I could have just bought it already looking like that. So that's what we're going to do. So the way we're going to start this soup is with just one onion that I've got chopped up, and again, thanks to our intern Steve for chopping vegetables for us today. So I'm going to get just one big pot going over some medium heat, and this is going to come together really quickly because the only thing we're really going to cook for any length of time is the onion to get it soft, and then everything's just going to go in a blender and then go in the pot to heat it up. So I have some olive oil. You can use olive oil, you can use canola, or you can use butter too for a little extra flavor. So I have about a tablespoon there. Just get it in. And we're just going to get our onions going in there too. You don't have to wait for your pot to be completely hot to use onions, because you're going to get them going so they're nice and soft. Anywhere from about 8 to 10 minutes. So while I'm doing that, I'll talk about some other pantry staples. So people always talk about, pantry staples, but what does that really mean, and what are good ideas to have in your pantry if you might not be able to get to the grocery store all the time? So the old standbys would be, of course, canned beans and canned grains. Both of those things come together really easily. Not canned grains, sorry, whole dried grains. Both of those things can be used to come together really quickly for an easy meal. So brown rice or quinoa or any other kind of grain, and then any kind of beans that you like. Because when you combine those two things, all you really need after that are maybe a couple of either canned or frozen vegetables and some seasoning, and you've got yourself a nice, full, hearty meal. So one of the things I like to do is do canned chickpeas, and then I mix it with brown rice. I throw some canned tomatoes in there, and then some cumin and some spicy things like maybe some pepper, like canned peppers, or even just dried spices, and you've got yourself a nice little chili. And then sometimes I really torture my family and add in the frozen spinach, because what's a meal without a green vegetable, right? So other things that are good to have on hand are some fresh items that might last a long time. So that might be like some citrus fruit. So you can always add great flavor with lemon, which we're going to add to the soup, or lime, which we're going to add to the salsa. But of course, onions too. I mean, onions, you can stock up on onions and put them in your refrigerator and they'll last quite a while. And especially if you're making something like a soup or something that gets cooked down, they don't have to be super fresh either. So keeping onions and garlic. So say you wanted to make this soup and you didn't have an onion, but you did have some garlic. You could still completely do it. Or say you didn't have frozen spinach, but you had, you know, another type of green vegetable like, I don't know, frozen kale or even like another type of bean. You could add that as well. So this is pretty versatile. We're just cooking down the onions. And one thing about canned vegetables is that sometimes they get a little bit of a bad rap, but really they're very nutritious. So, you know, we do try to prefer people to eat frozen or fresh vegetables, but canned vegetables definitely have their place. And the ones that I have today have no salt added, and then I'm also going to rinse them and drain them. So any liquid that they're sitting in that might have some salt, if you can't find the unsalted ones, is going to get drained off. So then I have just some nice peas that I didn't have to prep at all, and we're going to have a nice sweet pea soup. So this is going to be a little different than like your traditional split pea soup, where you would use like dried peas and it gets really, really thick. This is going to be like a bright green, more like a fresh soup. So some other pantry staples that are great to have on hand are, of course, lots of spices. So depending on, you know, the types of dishes that you like to cook, I use a lot of cumin and chili pepper and things like that because I can add a lot of flavor to any meal. But other things that are really good to have on hand are, you know, all the Italian spices, so oregano and thyme and things like that, because you can really also add a lot of flavor. So say I wanted to make that same chickpea dish, and instead of doing the cumin and the chili peppers, I wanted to make it more of like an Italian style meal. I could do it the exact same way, and instead of adding the cumin and chili and maybe some garam masala, I might add the thyme and some oregano and maybe serve it over pasta instead of over rice. So things are really versatile, and you can do a lot with things that are in your pantry. And there are a lot of websites out there that you can kind of just put in like maybe some staples that you have, and it will give you some recipe choices as well. Okay, so these are almost ready. And then what we're going to do is while these are finishing up, I'm just going to start adding things to my blender. So you don't have to completely thaw the spinach. So if you're I'm using a box of spinach where it's all stuck together. So I did thaw it for a little bit just so I could get it out of the package and like separate it out, but it doesn't have to be heated and it doesn't have to be fully thawed. So just enough to break it up because the blender is going to do our work for us. So this is about 3/4 of a cup of spinach. Put that in our blender. And then we're going to drain the peas. Come over here. You just want to drain them out. Whoops, I just lost my tops of my cans in the bottom there. Make sure you don't do that. And just rinse off enough to get the liquid that it's canned in. You could probably do this with frozen peas too. It would probably just work just as fine. And you can, of course, get those unsalted as well. Ooh, I'm going to make an awesome mess today. Get that in there. And my onions smell really done. You can see I just got a little bit of caramelization on there, and don't be afraid of things getting a little brown in your pan because brown food tastes really good. Let's turn that off so I don't burn my pan while I'm doing this. You might have a little bit more than we can fit in the blender, but we'll see. Yep, we're definitely going to have too much. Alright, so let's see how this goes. And we're just going to add some of the broth. So maybe about a cup to get you going. And then you'll add the rest when it goes back on the stove to cook through. And there is no top in this blender, so we're going to do that. need a little bit more liquid, and I'm going to add the rest of the onions if I can get them in too. This is kind of a lesson in like what not to do, which is overfill your blender. So when you have hot liquids, most of the stuff in here is cold, so it's probably fine. But usually if you have a lot of hot stuff, like if I was doing this with soup that I had already cooked, I would not want to fill it this much because I would probably have a nice explosion. But most of this stuff is cold, so it should be okay. One more dose of chicken broth to get it really smooth. See, I have a nice green spot on my mitt here. Alright, we're almost ready. You can see this is just going to be a big, beautiful, bright green color. So that should do it, and we're just going to return everything to the pan, or to the pot, and add some lemon juice and the rest of our broth and some seasoning, and that's our soup. So this soup has a ton of fiber. It has 10 grams of fiber from all those peas, but peas also have some protein in them too, so this is really like a complete full meal. But if you feel like you wanted to jazz it up or add some extra nutrition to it, you could top it with some Greek yogurt, or some croutons or Parmesan cheese. Okay, so that's good. We're just going to heat it up to heat it through. I'm going to add the juice of a lemon. I'm going to just juice it into here so I don't accidentally get any seeds. I think I say this all the time, but the best way to keep your seeds out of your lemon juice is to just squeeze your lemon. There goes one. Squeeze your lemon upside down so the juice goes into the bowl. Seeds stay right there with the lemon. Look at our other half. So if you don't have fresh lemon juice and you want to make this soup, I usually don't advise using like the canned or the bottled lemon juice. I think it would work fine in this, but also if you don't have that, any sort of acidic ingredient would actually work in either of these recipes. So the lemon is going to add some brightness, but also a little bit of acidity to the soup. But if you didn't have that, you could use some vinegar, or even a little bit of wine would work as well, just to add the acidity. Wow, that's really boiling up. Okay, so we've got that. And we're just going to add some dried thyme. So you can use any seasoning that you really like, but this is going to go with some dried thyme. And then I'm going to add in the rest of my broth because it's a little thick. So I'm going to use about 3.5 cups of broth, which is almost this entire container. And you want to make sure that you're using low sodium broth. And of course, having broth on hand is a really important pantry staple as well, because you can use it to add flavor and as a base for things, and it really kind of lasts for a really long time. So, stock up on these little cans or these containers. If you open one and then you don't think you're going to use the rest of it in time before it might go bad, put it in your freezer. Put it in some little ice cube trays or in some containers, and then whenever you need just a tiny bit of broth, you don't have to open up a whole another can or a whole another container. You just go right into your freezer. So, alright, and we're just going to add a touch of salt. About a teaspoon of salt. If you are using peas that were already salted, You might want to taste it first before you add the salt, but my peas had no salt in them, so I'm probably going to end up needing a little bit more. And that's really it. So you can see I have this beautiful bright green, completely full of fiber, veggie, and protein soup. Beautiful for a nice cold winter day. Took me less than 15 minutes with all things that I might find in my house normally. So I'm gonna lower this heat just to keep it on simmer. And we're gonna move over to our other recipe. So this salsa recipe you could really make with any canned fruit. I'm gonna be using sliced peaches, but it would also be great with pineapple, maybe even pears too, but something bright and fresh that you might not be able to get if it were the middle of the winter or if you didn't have access to any fresh foods. So we're going to use peaches and then onions and peppers and some cumin, a lime for some acidity, and then we're going to be using a chipotle pepper, which is a smoked jalapeno, so it's going to give it a nice smoky flavor. But if you didn't have one of these on hand, you could also use any kind of other canned chili, so just regular canned chilies, or if you had a fresh jalapeno, you could use that as well, or you could just leave it out. If you wanted that sort of tomato sauciness that these have, you could also just use some chopped tomatoes as well. So we're gonna open the peaches, and I need my strainer again, so I'm gonna get that. And these are just sliced peaches, and they are in juice and not in syrup, so they're not gonna add much extra sugar. Drain them. I'm not going to rinse them because I want them to kind of keep their a little bit of sweetness from the juice that they're in, but you definitely can if you're trying to get rid of all the sugar as well. So drain those, and then this is going to come together really quickly because everything's already prepped for me. So I have a pepper, just one small red pepper that's been chopped really small. You can use green pepper, yellow pepper, anything you want. This is just going to be a really colorful dish. And then I've got a red onion, also chopped really small. And then we're going to just take our peaches and run our knife through them. People at the canning factory forgot one of those seeds. We'll just run, and you don't have to be too precise about this, just enough to cut it up into little bite-sized pieces that match the rest of the salsa. So again, talking about canned products, canned fruit sort of gets a bad rap as well, and definitely there is some added sugar, but it's still fruit in there. So if that's all you have at a certain time, it's certainly better than digging into a bag of chips to have some canned fruit as a snack, and you're still going to get some nice vitamins, some fiber, and all that, good, healthy antioxidants that we always talk so much about. All right, so get that into the bowl. Okay, actually I'm gonna pick this up. Just slice those right in. Look at all those pretty colors. Alright, and then our final two ingredients are going to be this chipotle and also the lime juice, and then some cumin and salt. So if you like things really spicy, I would suggest using more than one. I'm sort of a medium heat girl, so I'm just going to use one. And I'm just going to run my knife through it. You can see how it's nice and saucy there. They have a lot of seeds in them too. But these are smoked, so they give like a really nice, warm, smoky flavor, and they go really well with any kind of like chicken dish or fish. So if you wanted to make a really exciting chicken breast, after your 8 millionth chicken breast this year, and you wanted to really jazz it up in a bright, summery way when it's the middle of winter, you could do it with this. So we'll add about a tablespoon of cumin and the juice of our lime. And again, if you don't have a lime, use some cider vinegar, even some white vinegar, just to give it some wetness and some acidity. Or in a pinch, you could use the bottled lime juice too. That would work. All right. So I mentioned that this would be great on chicken or fish, or even like a pork tenderloin would be delicious. But today, I'm actually going to be using it to make sort of what I call one of those last minute hors d'oeuvres. So I know most of us aren't entertaining all that much right now, but you know, maybe you are with your family on a Friday night and you just want to have something fun and you don't have any salsa or you don't have anything on hand. You could make this, but I'm actually going to make it as a little appetizer. So I have just one baguette that I sliced up and then brushed a little olive oil on and toasted in my oven for a couple minutes. And then I'm going to top it with a dollop of ricotta cheese. So ricotta cheese makes everything taste delicious and a little fancy. If you didn't have ricotta, you could use cream cheese. You could use even cottage cheese if that's your thing. So just dollop that on like this. I'm just going to do a few of them, but this would be what the whole tray would look like. And then just put a little bit of my salsa on top. So I'll have probably way more salsa than I would need for this appetizer, so I'll have leftovers. So I probably could do this appetizer and make my chicken dish all at the same time. And just look how pretty and festive and bright that is. And I've got pepper and I've got peaches, I've got a chipotle, so it's going to be full of flavor. The longer you let this sit too, the longer the onion will mellow out and be less of a strong flavor. So that's that, and we'll spoon some soup into a bowl. You can see that. And one thing that's great too about soups is they freeze really well. So if you live alone and you don't feel like you could get through all this soup, you know, in 3 or 4 days, you could freeze this and it would last for a really long time. So top this with some Parmesan or a dollop of Greek yogurt and you have a gorgeous lunch or dinner. You can see that. So if you're joining us late, my name is Beth. I'm one of the registered dietitians here at Community Servings, and thank you for joining us for our 20th episode of Learning Kitchen Live, where we've been talking about cooking with pantry staples and canned items. So I'll pause here to see if we have any questions. No questions for me today. Alrighty, well this was short and sweet. I hope that you make one of these recipes. I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday, and we will see you back here in December. And thanks for coming. Bye.